Welcome, everybody. I am so pleased today to introduce you to Taylor Smalls. Taylor, welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. How are you?
So I appreciate it. I'm doing very well. I'm happy to be
Awesome.
with
So Taylor, you are an artist and designer working in the Bay Area. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your work?
So I am still a designer, but more former architectural designer. I've been in architecture for about 7.5 years. And as of late, I've fully transitioned into painting full time. I've been painting for about 11 years. So currently I make, or I've always made, very large scale female portraiture. I'm a palette knife painter, and my work centers around women of color, making really bold portraits of women, and just taking up a lot of space on canvas with these women.
I love it. And there's a lot of color in them. They're very bold and big.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I would love to start. You wrote me an email and you mentioned taking the leap. And so I would love that as a place to start.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what you were going through, what you were thinking about, and what you did.
Yeah. Okay. So that really, that has something, I think, that's been something I think my previous employers thought was going to happen many, many years ago. And I basically always had this equal love for both architecture and the built environment, and creating spaces, designing, interior design, all of that. And it's been totally balanced by my art practice as well. And architecture, as you know, because I know your father's an architect, is creative for about 3 months. And then it becomes very, very, very technical on any project, and is a lot of, client management, and it's kind of a lot of bureaucracy, honestly. And so I've always really leaned really hard into my painting practice, because that was the avenue in which I could actually still remain creative and have autonomy with my creative path. So ostensibly, like when we had to go back into office after, the pandemic started to slow, I realized I need to be making a lot more. And I fell in love with being at home and being in my studio and being able to paint during lunch and paint immediately after I turned off my computer at, 6 o'clock. And that space, the creative space, my painting practice, was really what was fulfilling me most at that time. And so I decided, at that point, I had already been doing Sunlight for about a year. And I felt confident enough in my organization, organizational tools that you've set up, and the knowledge that I had gained from it, to feel good in taking, the quote unquote leap that people say, which is doing art full time.
That's so exciting. So can we dig into that a little bit? Yeah. So I'm really curious, like what was it that you felt like you had to get a handle on before you took the leap? It sounds like you had this brewing for a while.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm curious kind of like what that ramp up phase was, and what you got a hold of, and especially like on the financial and tax side before you took the leap and left your day job.
So I think a lot of it came down to actually knowing what my numbers truly worked out to. Before I had started Sunlight, I didn't even think of this being an actual business. And it wasn't until, realizing how the IRS actually like categorizes a business, or I just realized, okay, I need to actually be paying taxes on this income. And I think once I really got my numbers in order and I was able to look at my books after a full year, I was like, okay, this is actually a functional thing that I can, survive on as well. And so it was really just seeing it on paper and not thinking about the income I was making from paint sales previously as just like extra money on the side to play with, but as something that, if I'm able to do it, basically be a Sunday painter, if I were, and look at those numbers on paper, if I were to scale that and be Monday through Friday painter kind of thing, what that would look like, and being able to just scale those numbers and feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Had you ever done bookkeeping before you realized that you wanted to go full time, or was that part of what you did to get ready to do it?
No, I had never done it until, basically a year before I left my architectural practice, which is when I started Sunlight. I had heard you speak on, I think it was high fructose. Is that correct? It was a podcast that you had done.
Hyperallergic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that was during the pandemic, and that triggered me to say, like, I wonder what it would look like to actually look at the expenses, what I'm putting in and what's coming out and how frequently I'm selling. And it just, the clarity is really helpful.
So awesome to hear. So tell me what you found the most helpful in the Money Bootcamp program. I'm curious.
The fact that you have all of the talks, of course, I really appreciate those, but I think for me, I love organization. I love a spreadsheet, which doesn't really seem like it would go hand in hand with like an artist's mind, but I have probably 10 lists next to me, and I have my agenda on my wall on a whiteboard. I love a list, and I love just like keeping, being able to check things off or come back to it. And so the expense document, the whole Google sheet. How do you describe it?
The spreadsheet, the bookkeeping spreadsheet. Yeah.
The bookkeeping spreadsheet, which tracks expenses, your home office, your income, whatever you've paid in quarterly taxes, and clicking on the, final button, and it shows you just like where you are completely. It's been so helpful.
That's awesome.
I get excited and I show my boyfriend and I show my friends, and it's like, this is how I keep my brain straight.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. I mean, it can be so scary to look, especially if you haven't looked before, and it can be very unpleasant. I mean, I think it's very analogous to like drinking a lot and eating tons of dessert, which were my particular vices during COVID, for example, like getting on the scale and being like, oh no, like, I don't want to face this.
Yeah.
But it's like, once you look, you have a sort of path.
Exactly. And a point of reference to use around.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious, like, there's such a, like just that moment of when you like left your day job and like that, like working up that courage and that confidence. I think that is a really huge deal. And first of all, I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
It's just amazing.
Not easy. I will say that it was not easy.
For sure. I mean, what are some of the shifts that you've had to make, like being full-time on your own? Because this is very different, not having that structure of the workplace.
Yeah. So I had a lot of chats with friends who have gone on their own within the design field as well, and in the art field. And I really just crowdsourced a lot of ways people started making like structure and healthy habits at that beginning jump. And I am one who hates exercising, but I realized that just joining a friend every morning at the gym is at least getting me out of bed and keeping me on a schedule. And, just it's starting to, you structure a day basically. And so that was a really big shift at the beginning, is what do I want, a day to look like, and when do I want to start it, and how energized do I want to be, just to have some mile markers. So that was a really big one. Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, well, just like how that transition moment, and like how you kind of what shifted when you moved to full-time, being an artist full-time, which is like a dream for a lot of people, but super scary.
Well, I think what shifted is just really just trying to be as organized as possible and really make this feel like a career and not just, being a Sunday painter. And my mind really shifted to, I do half a day of bookkeeping and emails, and I wait until the light gets really good in here, which is, kind of afternoonish. And that's when I stop doing, I put down all of, any kind of computer work and, errands and whatnot for my art practice. And then I paint the rest of the day. And so I'm trying to be really intentional about just how to block out my life. And so it feels like a job, and it's not like I'm running to go, have lunch or a drink or something with somebody in the middle of the day. It's like I'm I'll tell people, no, I'm working until 5. And that's, and just making sure that there are clear boundaries around this being full time and not, just kind of a willy-nilly thing.
Yeah. I think that's so important. I live by my calendar and my schedule. Like
same here.
my morning walk, my routine. And it's like, if something goes off the schedule, I like kind of messes me up.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think that we like to think of ourselves as like free spirited, no boundaries, as artists. And I actually find just that the opposite is true. My creativity thrives with structure.
Same. I agree. And I talk about this a lot with people, in that I can only speak on myself. I can't speak on other creative minds and creative practices and whatnot. But I personally think structure, if we're thinking about our artistic practices as small businesses, ostensibly, like there has to be that structure, and there has to be like respect around it being, I am going to stick to this structure, and, stay organized so that, I don't know, things don't fall through the cracks here and there just because, you needed to paint for a week straight and not, do any of your books or follow up with any people that, are waiting for an email from you. And I think that it goes hand in hand with like, so, I don't know. I'm hesitant to say a successful practice, because the successful practice can just be the art in and of itself. But like, I don't know, making this like a long-term, 10, 15, 20, 30 year career, I think there has to be a lot of structure built into a day from the get-go.
Agreed. Yeah. And also for sustainability. Yeah. I mean, like, I love that you're thinking about the long-term like that. I think that's important. So you mentioned something that I think is really interesting. You were talking about the fact that you really aggressively paid back some loans. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah.
So what was the scenario and what did you do?
So I have had loans. I've had student loans for far too long. I've been out of school for, it's not far too long. I'm still very young, but I've had a lot of student loans, which is something that I pay just over, like my minimum amount kind of thing. And I've just, mentally I accepted I'm going to have these loans for 10 years, coming out of school. And that's just something that's continually paid. However, when I make any kind of mega purchase, like a new car, or I recently was able to purchase some land in New Mexico, those are really, I focus, aggressively pay those loans down, or just, upfront pay them, so that I'm not stacking more debt onto, just the one piece of debt that I have accepted to have for a little bit of time. Because I think that mentally, the more, obviously, debt bogs you down. But I think that if you can just pay one thing consistently, know that you have the income for that, which is just like paying down your credit card kind of thing every month, that is something that you have in the bag. It's like just whatever you budget for your groceries, or whatever you budget just in general for anything. But as you start to stack, everything gets muddied. And so I just decided to start aggressively paying towards my land, which was just paid off, and car paid off. And those things, when you just have those assets, it's just, there's nothing that, I don't know. It feels like a little bit of freedom in general to me. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. That's super exciting. I do think of getting rid of debt as having freedom.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just
how I think of it.
But I've also thought about debt as a motivator too. And that's something that I've like not been bothered by with my student loans, is that it keeps me motivated to have, I don't know, it pushes me to make sure that I'm selling X amount of work, or I have, had my architectural practice, and it makes it so I'm not like just zooming off to Europe and, gallivanting for 6 months at a time, because it keeps me accountable in a way. Like a small amount of debt, I feel, keeps me accountable, is how I've always thought about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's such interesting psychology around money in general.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of stuff around pricing where I think when people have things, when things are free to people, even if they're things that other people pay for, but you get it for free, there's like pretty good research that shows that people don't treat it very seriously. They don't take it seriously. And then actually paying for something makes you take it more seriously.
Absolutely.
It's something really to think about, especially, I've been doing a couple episodes lately about pricing, which always makes me so nervous, because I'm nervous when, people get really triggered around that subject.
I love talking about pricing.
Ooh, all right.
But yes.
But it's important, because actually sometimes, when you pay for, I'm not a handbag person. I don't really do status objects unless you're talking about like artwork.
Yeah.
But like, if you buy a really high-end handbag, you're not going to just like throw it on the floor and put your wet raincoat on top of it. You know what I mean? Like paying a price or something makes you treat it a certain way. And so there is this real psychology that ties into it.
Big time.
So
very
talk to me about, so you mentioned you love talking about pricing, and we have not talked about like who your clients are. If you like, I don't actually know how you run your art practice, if you sell through galleries or if you do it yourself. Talk to me about that. And I'm very curious about the pricing element.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna use my words wisely. I do not work a lot with galleries. I have had some really great experiences with galleries, because the gallerists were like friends of mine, and so we've had really positive work relationships. However, I do not personally love the gallery structure, in that I think a lot of people know the industry standard is 50%. It's 50-50. And so when I talk to friends who are starting to show in galleries, I absolutely tell them to up their work much more than what they actually think the value of the piece is, so that when they, sell a piece, if they have 50% taken, or not taken, but 50% goes to the gallerist, what they are left with, you should feel very, very good about that number. That should be very satisfying to you. And I think, that lesson was learned. I learned that lesson because I had like a little bit of an icky feeling after, many years of working with galleries, actually. And I don't think anybody should ever leave, putting their work into the world and feeling lesser than. It should feel good to, sell a piece and it's going to somebody. And unfortunately, there is a monetary, tie to that. And whether we like to think about it or not, a lot of us do tie, where we are in life to where we are financially. And to have something so vulnerable go out into the world, which is your creation and a part of you, you shouldn't feel an ick when that happens if it's not, compensated in the way that you believe it should be. So so that's something.
I think that's really important. And I mean, like, any good pricing should feel on both sides like an appropriate energetic exchange. Each party, I think, for that transaction to really feel mutually good, you both have to feel like you got a good value out of it, right? Like, that's how, as a culture, we agree on pricing. And yes, there is something really, in my mind, like working with a gallery, and I do work with galleries, and I actually really love, I deeply appreciate the sort of like collector base that they have access to that I do not, and that they do, they do a lot of hard work.
Exactly.
So like, I speak as a gallery artist, but there is something that has always been sort of like interesting to me, because in Sunlight Tax, I have a very direct relationship. Like, I am serving the people who are paying me, and therefore that I love that direct relationship. And in fact, sometimes other organizations come in and they want to work with me and commission me to do this thing for their people. And I sort of dislike it, even though I do those arrangements sometimes, like, because now I'm not accountable to the people I'm serving. I'm accountable to a third party. And it like skews the relationship a little and puts a lot more weirdness in. Whereas that direct feedback of like, I'm getting this, I'm paying this, feels really good. So,
exactly. Yeah.
That was a long.
That makes a lot of sense.
Digression.
No,
but I'm curious. So does that mean, Taylor, that you, and if you, I can understand that it might be sensitive to talk about, so it's okay if you don't feel comfortable and you just tell me. But does this mean that you work directly with collectors, or you do commissions, or I'm just curious, like how you operate?
I work directly one-to-one with my collectors. I until about 6 months ago, I did not field commissions because I had the luxury of having a full-time job and painting on the side. I wanted to create work for myself rather than in tandem with others. So it's commissions and working one-on-one with collectors. But I've also started to enter space. About a year ago, I started to work with a large tech firm here. So I'm in the Bay, I'm in Oakland. And I started working with a large tech firm that has been a really beautiful opportunity to do some rental work with, which is a space that I think that more people should know about and start to dive into. And I'm starting to develop a program with a good friend of mine, bringing rental programs to, hospitality spaces and tech spaces, because I think that there is, that in a way is a really untapped market for artists to display their work, have it shown, work with corporate contracts, and have it, just rented for a period of time and then receive the work back. And I think that pricing in that space has been really interesting too, because you can ask them what their budgets are versus you initially starting, because I find that a lot of tech spaces, sorry, the kitten here, a lot of tech spaces have, they'll ask you what you would like to price your work at. And I think that there's an interesting way for artists to flip the script when it comes to corporate entities, and you be more negotiation forward and kind of ask what their budget is and then work from there, because it's exactly what you were just saying. It should feel equal on both. That's when pricing really works, is when it really feels equal on both sides. Each party feels like they're getting, they're not being cheated in any way, but they're also getting a beautiful product, and then the other person is, fully compensated for the tier at which, it's not just you're selling to your mom, it's you're selling to a corporation. And so I think that, pricing can be variable sometimes. I've always operated on like a baseline. I price based off of sizing of my pieces. And so I've always operated off of a baseline via size. And then adjusted depending on if I'm working with a corporation or a restaurant or an individual collector. Yeah. Cool. So I don't know if that was too much information.
No. Oh, I mean, I could talk about it all day because I'm fascinated by it in general, but like, that sounds so, I think a lot of artists feel discomfort around talking directly about money, for example. And I think that you're really illustrating that when you get a little more comfortable with it and comfortable with like how you value your work, how you price it, and how you discuss it, how you like approach, a tech company and they say, what is your budget? Like getting comfortable with those conversations allows you a lot more leeway to kind of equalize the energetic exchange of pricing.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
And that you are like showing us that you've taken that on as opposed to working through a gallery, which, I mean, like that exists and it's good. And like I said, I'm a gallery artist.
It is
really
good.
Appreciate what my gallery does for me.
Yes.
But there's a lot to be gained from doing it on your own, which is, I think for some people really scary. So
yes. Yeah, I do. I do agree. I think, how do I say that? I don't know where that comfortability came from, because I don't come from a family who loves to talk about money necessarily. But I think that kind of being in the dark around money sometimes has made me really curious and just want to ask people, because like, I don't want to, have to like forge my own path always. I just want to be able to talk about it more. And I think that people are open to it when you ask them, and it's, money is something that shouldn't be kept in the dark necessarily, or how to approach it, especially as an artist, because I think that historically that's kind of what fuels this like starving artist mentality, is that we're not sharing the information. And I think, it's just have to talk about it more.
I totally agree. I totally agree. There's something I really love about like the business environment. And I say this like having come absolutely full circle. Like I started out life as an anti-capitalist and I didn't believe in any of this. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, there's like standards of treatment in the business world. And I really like that after having experienced the art world for a long time, which was like, people will be very unprofessional, and there's a lot more tolerance for that in a way that there is not in the business world. And after enough abuse, I was like, okay, I think I like it over here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But
and
like
I think, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I just was going to say that I have come to really appreciate the sort of frankness around money that exists in the business world, and feel like that is illuminating and empowering and really nice. Like I enjoy, and in fact, I think this is kind of an American trait. But like, I enjoy that like American business sense of directness. What is the ask? Just like, what are you looking for? let's
Yes,
not beat around the bush. Just tell me what you want and I'll tell you how I feel about that. I love
exactly.
that.
Exactly. And I think that people feel very uncomfortable around that within art because it should
Yes.
be, you know, like this is a personal expression or da da da. I don't mean to like talk about it so flippantly, but it's just like I think that there's this really weird mentality around artists and money and them not knowing how to advocate for themselves or be frank or be forward or have a contract ready. Like I love to share my contracts with my friends, and
Oh,
I ask my best friend, she paints here too, and she sends me her contracts whenever she does a new job, and so we pick and pull parts of, you know, certain clauses and have formulated our own contracts. And it's just like the information's there, we just need to share it.
that's
Unless it's
awesome.
like an NDA, but you know.
Sure, fair. That's
But
awesome that you do that. I love that.
yeah, there's like a plethora of information around us, and people should come prepared, like, or just read through or know. And yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
This
I think
book
that's great.
has been like a little Bible for that reason.
Feel like an artist.
Yes.
Oh, cool. We'll have to link
It's
that
so
in the show
good.
notes.
I will, yeah, or I'll send it to you. But it's kind of just, you know, kind of hacks in the art world, but in money and contracts and all sorts of stuff, and just useful information that I don't.
That's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. Anyhow.
Another thing that I was just thinking about with that like equal exchange and the empowerment of actually taking on the money conversation yourself
Mhm.
is that I think a lot of artists don't understand how intimidating our world is to the buyer a lot of the time.
Mm,
Like people feel really scared about talking about art. They feel scared they're going to be stupid or
yep.
they're not going to see something that other people see and they don't know how to value art and they're really looking for help from
Yeah.
whoever they're talking to, which, you know, I think gallerists get a lot of practice in coaching and directing that conversation and framing the way that work gets valued. Artists can do that too, but you have to be aware. I think when you ever experience like buying a work of art, it's a very different side of the
Agreed.
equation from selling a piece of art.
I completely agree. Absolutely. And it's so I want to give an anecdote because I just made a little I just had a nice learning lesson this past month around the perception of the work when people don't know what's gone into it or what's behind it. Or I guess from the buyer
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
So I typically do holiday prints. I do like a small run of prints during the holidays. And they're typically these little 12 by 12. I frame them and send them off for, you know, I think they're like $150 or something. And this year, I recently found this beautiful printmaker that's in West Oakland, down the street from me. And they make their paper by hand and they make these gorgeous giant prints and super, super high quality everything. And I was like, this is the most premium print I could ever make on the planet. And it's stunning. And there's so much love from, you know, their hands to my work to the printing process, like all of it. And so I was like, okay, how do I want to value this? If this is the highest quality product I could make right now, like what does that look like versus the prints I was previously making, which were wonderful, but much smaller. And, you know, I think my mistake was to not, I priced it obviously much higher, these new prints, but the mistake was to not let people in on the minutia of what it is to work with them. And this, like, you know, take a video or show people what it is to like make this pulp, like make the paper and how they print and how they transfer this image and this other beautiful process that's happening, very large. And I think that the price point that I had the pieces at, which I think were about $650. So that there's a big jump. We were talking about numbers, but
Yeah,
so that's a big jump for these prints. And
for sure.
I think what was not translated was the amount of energy and like the people that we were working with, and everything that goes into it. And so I think from the buyer's standpoint, they were like, I've always collected her prints, but they were $150 before. And how are they $650 now? And so I think that people simply need to know more of the background of like what goes into the sausage, and not just seeing this final product, because that makes everything, it's more relatable. You can connect, you can say, oh, that's so interesting. My dad used to be a paper maker or something like that. And like, you'll have a new tie to it. And I think that that's really important, is just showing the behind the scenes so that people understand the value of what's.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely your job and I think if you're not an experienced seller of things, and man, it is a skill and it takes some effort
Sure.
to get good
Yes,
at.
it does.
But like communicating what the value is, that is sort of the job of the seller. And that is, that's a really beautiful illustration. Like, why did this print used to be 150 and now it's 650? What happened?
Exactly.
But it's very reasonable. I think it's also really important to keep in mind that like, there are real genuine reasons there, and you can explain them. And you can easily see someone feeling really triggered when somebody's like, why does it cost so much?
Totally. Yes.
But it's actually not personal in any way, right? Like
Exactly.
We're working with handmade paper now. That's a, completely different animal, and you're working with a printmaker, and like you just have to, it's your job to communicate all those different factors that are
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that it just makes it so much more satisfying from the buyer's perspective, to understand just more of what went into something, and it justifies, any number that you see. And so that you don't feel like a dumb person who doesn't know why something is so expensive,
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Also, I think we underestimate that people love the story.
Yes.
Like, the person who buys the thing is going to then tell the story of the handmade paper and like
exactly
how you source your imagery or whatever it is, whatever. Or even, a lot of times this part of the story is your story. Like, here's Taylor Smalls, here's, her story is XYZ, and this is why she does it. That your biography becomes a piece of the art, which is, I think, why it can feel a little personal. But
yes. Yeah, exactly.
That's a part of it. Awesome. Well, Taylor, I want to be respectful of your time. This is such a pleasure. Is there anything I did not ask you that you want to share in this setting of people who are self-employed, thinking of taking the leap?
I would say, honestly, if you're in a space, anybody listening is in a space where they're considering, the whole concept of taking the leap, or you are newly self-employed, just try and think ahead of this year. Try and think of what is 10 years from now and what that looks like, and the structure that you want to create from the foundational point that you're at right now, so that you can continue to make your work. And this didn't feel like a hard thing to do. It is a hard thing inherently. Running a business is a hard thing, but you don't want your work to suffer from it, and you don't want to feel so dependent upon what you are creating. And to do that, I really do think that it's really a financial game of just getting your foundation really set. And that's just my final tidbit.
I love it. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I believe in that too.
Definitely. Yeah.
Awesome.
This was so lovely, Hannah. Thank you.
Yeah, Taylor, thank you so much for sharing a piece of your story. And I'm going to link to your website in the show notes so that people can find you and reach out to you if they're interested in learning more about your work.
That sounds wonderful.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate
And I'll
it.
see you soon, I'm sure.
Wonderful.
All right.
All right.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.